We're going to get right into it. We're starting a new series called United, We Are Family. How many of you know that we're a family here? And hopefully you feel a sense of family every time that you walk in. Hopefully you feel like it's a place where you can let the mask down. You feel like it's a place where you can just be yourself. Because here at the United, we believe wholeheartedly that you don't have to believe what we believe to belong right here where we are. And you don't have to behave yourself to belong right here where we are. We hope over time you'll behave yourself. Don't get me wrong. Some of you are like, he said we didn't have to behave, mom, dad. Like, no, I didn't say that. Like, no. But you don't have to behave to be here. We love you just where you're at. And so we're just so thankful that you're here. You can bring your baggage and know that there is a God that can set you free from that. And we believe that wholeheartedly. But want to welcome all of our prison campuses watching, all of our YouTube viewers that are out there. Thanks so much again for tuning in with us. We're excited that you're with us. Can we hear it for them really quick? And yeah, it's awesome that the United not only happens here, but it happens so many other places. It's really an honor to just be a part of what God's doing in this region. And so excited that you're here. I wanted to talk to you from the subject just this first week. And I'm not going to talk long because I happen to know, like, Part of communication is just knowing where you're at and the time that you're in. And so the time that we're in right now, you guys just came off Christmas break. How many of you had the first day of school today? Yeah, and so that's why I'm not going to go long. I'm going to go short, right? Because I know that the struggle is real. I remember the 7:30 or 8 a.m. mornings going to about a 3:30 or 4 into the day where you're listening to teachers all day long. And so my hope is that church for you tonight, the United, isn't something that you have to endure, but it's something that you actually enjoy. But my heart for this ministry, and I know that our leaders and our staff would say the same, my heart for this ministry is I want people to know that this is a ministry where everybody is welcome. Everybody is included. I titled this message, Strictly Inclusive. Strictly inclusive. Because if we're not careful, sometimes we can start to be exclusive in our lives. Have you ever noticed this? Have you ever noticed that sometimes, especially in the Christian world, really the Christian world is kind of the only place that it happens. You start to like be in church for a while, and then you get like where you're like, oh man, they don't act the right way. They don't do the right thing. They don't believe the right thing. And so you think like you're somehow better. I believe that the United should be a place where everyone is welcome. Everyone is included, and everybody should feel the right to just come and just be them. Have you ever had somebody that was kind of just that person? Have you ever known that person? We all know like that person, right? I worked with that person. Like I used to work at a factory called Thermo Manufacturing, and what I did there was almost as boring as school. Like I would stand there at a table and I would package stuff all day long. Like I had a tape gun and I would tape boxes and then I'd throw them on a skid. And that was what I did 8 hours a day for 5 days a week while going to college. It was awesome. Can I tell you? It was great. And so I remember boxing, and you always have that one person that is that person. And that person for us won't be named, but my friend and I worked together, so a lot of times we'd go in on lunch. And I'll never forget, we'd get like pizza and breadsticks from Little Caesars because, we're balling on a budget. So you got to get the $5 hot and ready. But then, have you ever had crazy bread? Like, is crazy bread not phenomenal? I mean, can we hear it one time for crazy bread? It's just great. Yes, there it is. No golf claps. Crazy bread is awesome. And so we would get crazy bread. And this dude that we worked with, he was like, crazy. He would was the guy that would save his whole paycheck. He'd have pull out his wallet and have $200 in there at all times because he was what we call a penny pincher, right? He would just not spend any money. So he would sit there lunchless and stare at my buddy Chad and I as we would eat our pizza and just give us the puppy dog eyes. Just give us the puppy dog eyes. And just look, and he'd just look longingly. He'd seduce your pizza out of the box. You know what I mean? With his eyes. He'd just be staring at it until you finally said, Dave, do you want a piece? But there were some times that I just didn't want to be we'll just call him Dave for sake of time. Dave, do you want a piece? Dave, I just would get tired of it. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'd hold out. right? Sometimes I'd be like, I am not gonna ask him if he wants a piece. In fact, I'm not gonna give him a piece at all. And he would just stand there, and a half an hour seems like a really long time when somebody is standing there or sitting there with puppy dog eyes, just like, staring at your pizza, staring at your breadsticks. So I'd finally cave every time. Chad would give me a hard time. I would cave every time. I'd be like, Dave, do you want a piece? Go ahead. Go ahead, you can have some. Then he'd eat that piece, and then of course he would want more. He was also a runner, so he ate a ton. So it was like, this is awesome. Like, he would eat like 2 pieces of pizza, a breadstick, and not contribute any money at all towards the meal. You know what I'm saying? We all have known that person, right? We all have known that person who it's like, they look at you with the puppy dog eyes and you're like, I feel bad, but I don't really want to ask you. And I'm so thankful that church is a place that everybody has the right to participate. Everybody has the right. See, sometimes I wouldn't want to let Dave participate in the eating because he didn't pay. See, church is a place where this whole thing, every one of us, regardless of what time we got in this thing, we got in for free. Nobody paid to be here. Nobody paid to be a part of this family. Nobody paid to be saved by Jesus. It was a free gift, so you don't have to pay to participate. And in fact, everybody has a right to participate. And can I encourage you tonight that we have a right to let them know? We have a right to let them know. Every single person that we come in contact with has a right to participate in this family at the United, and we have a right to let them know. Will we let them know? And I think that's one of the big things that God's laid on my heart for this year is the United should be a refuge of hope, just a place of hope. In the midst of a lost and dying and broken world, we should be able to invite people here and say, hey, come on, join the family. You're good. Just come be a part of what we do. Everybody has the right to participate, and we have the responsibility to let them know. See, I've always been more of an includer. Anybody with me? Like, I've always just been an includer. Like, for instance, when I was young, I loved playing basketball, football, baseball, whatever sport it was, right? I just loved playing sports. And so I would literally go door to door knocking to see if there were kids that lived there that would play baseball, basketball, or football with. Whatever season it was, I would literally just go door to door because I didn't know everybody in the neighborhood and I didn't know everybody in the next street over. So I'd go door to door and an adult would answer the door and I'd be like, are there any kids that live here? And they just look like, who are you? I'd be like, well, I was just gonna see if there's anybody like my age here because I was gonna see if they wanted to play basketball. And they're like, yeah, hold on just a minute. And they'd like go get their kids and then their kids would come. And that's how I made friends. Like, you know, I made friends that way. I made friends door to door. Some of you have heard about door to door salesmen. I was selling myself and I needed some friends. You know what I mean? So I would just go door to door and find friends. And that's how our whole neighborhood clique got together. We got together through me, literally. And we would joke about it once I got a little older. We would joke about it and be like, you literally came to our door. That's how we met you. You came to our door and asked us to come out and play basketball with you. How lame. It was like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. But I've always had that includer. So now that includer looks like, man, I just want people to be a part of what I'm a part of. Anybody else, anything that you're a part of that's good, you're just like, man, I want to bring people in. Man, I'm so passionate about this. I want to bring people in. I believe that we should be that same way about church. And here's the thing, if you're sitting here tonight and you're saying, man, I don't even have hope. I don't even feel a part of the family. Can we just say to you tonight, welcome home. You are part of the family, whether you feel like you belong or not, you're part of this family. We love you here. We accept you here. And we want you to feel like you're right at home here where we are. And so I just have always had that thing about me where I want to include everybody. I just want everybody to be a part of the thing that I'm a part of. And so I think there should be that kind of pride when it comes to our church, when it comes to the United. We should have that same feeling of, man, this is good. We're going to have a good time. We're gonna encourage each other. We're gonna love each other, but we're more than anything, we're just gonna have a party. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna learn about Jesus, and Jesus is the one who's the only one worth living for. And so we're gonna have a good time, and I want other people to have a good time with me. But there's a couple things that I've noticed that you're gonna have to confront if you wanna be inclusive. If you wanna be inclusive, you're gonna have to confront a couple things. First of all, to be inclusive, you're gonna have to confront your insecurities. Because your insecurities will always seek comfort over contribution. Your insecurities are always gonna cause you to gravitate towards comfort and towards cowarding, towards what you should be going after. See, I've never known anybody to be inclusive that's insecure, because every time they're inclusive, they're like threatened by other people. Like sometimes if we're honest, we don't wanna include people in our friend group because we're threatened by them. We don't wanna include people in what we're a part of because we feel threatened, and that's an insecurity issue in us. That's an issue with us. And the only way that we're gonna confront the issue of insecurity that's within us so that we can be inclusive is by gaining a confidence in the finished work of Jesus. What he says about us, who he says that we are, the position that he's given us as his followers. We need to know those things. Why? Because that's where our confidence is found. Anything else that you find your confidence in right now, can I encourage you that it's fleeting and it will fail you. But if your confidence, and you choose to rest your confidence in who Jesus is and what he's done for you, you'll never lack for confidence. Seasons of your life will change, stages of your life will go by, and you won't lack for confidence. I found that so much of our identity sometimes is wrapped up in what we do instead of who we are. And it can even not be like the good things or the bad things that you do. I'm talking about myself. Like in high school, so much of my identity was wrapped around the fact that I played basketball. And that's what people would praise me for. That's what people would say good job the most for and encourage me the most in. And people would love that I played basketball and love that I could shoot the ball. And so literally a lot of my identity was wrapped up in my ability to put a ball in a hoop. And it sounds silly to talk about it, but so much of us, our identity is wrapped in the wrong thing. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a sport that you play, maybe it's something that you're good at, because that's where you get the most praise, that's where you get the most accolades. And then once that thing is gone, all of a sudden your confidence is gone and people struggle with insecurity. That's why I have the privilege of doing high school and college ministry, and I've noticed that people who were stellar athletes in high school, sometimes when they don't play that same sport in college, they have identity crisis because who they once were is no longer who they identify with now, and they start to think, who am I? Because if you live for the praise of people, you'll die to their criticism. And if you take down the facade and the thing that you wrap your confidence in, if you take that away, all of a sudden it's just you facing yourself. And for some of us, that can be scary because that season of your life will pass by. Can I ask you, is Jesus the thing that you find your confidence in? Or is it something else? Is who you are in him what you find your confidence in? Or is it something that you currently do? Because I'd encourage you to challenge yourself before you get out of high school. I'd encourage you to challenge yourself and ask yourself that so that you don't find yourself one day when that thing's gone, not knowing who you are and not having any confidence about yourself. The second thing that I believe we're gonna have to confront if we're gonna be inclusive is you're gonna have to confront your fear. Confront your fear. I think that fear holds people back probably more than anything else. And if we're honest, most of the time, if you're anything like me, our nature can kind of be this way, that we fear what we don't know. We fear what we don't know. The unknown can be a scary, scary thing. We fear what we don't understand. And so if we don't understand somebody or we don't know somebody, sometimes we fear we have a fear of the rejection that we might experience if we try to reach out. We have a fear of, they're different than me. They don't act like me. They don't like the same things. Can I encourage you, on the other side of your fear, there's a step of faith that you might be called to take that'll be one of the greatest gifts on the other side of it that God could ever have for you. Some of my best friends in this world are totally opposite than me. And anybody on this front row can vouch for that. They know some of the people I hang out with. They are so far opposite of me, but had I not reached out of that fear and taken a step of faith to reach out to those people and befriend those people, I would have robbed myself the opportunity for some of the best family that I have in my life right now, some of the best friendships that I have in my life right now. In order to be inclusive, you're gonna have to get rid of and confront your fear. There is fear that grips every one of us, and it looks different, but relational fear is definitely real. You're afraid to reach out of your clique to another clique because you're afraid of just being rejected. And sometimes it's the simple fact of you just don't want to be around people that are different than you because different makes you uncomfortable. I believe that if we're going to be inclusive, we've got to first have a confidence about who we are enough to know, like, man, they need what I have. So I'm gonna reach out regardless of whether they're like me or not. I think it's essential. And I look around the room right now and I see people like Libby who's sitting in the back. And I see people like Austin who's sitting up here. And I see other leaders all across this room that represent leaders. We have some phenomenal leaders, by the way, some of the best on the planet. But they all represent people who aren't afraid to talk to people that aren't like them. To try to dig to find common ground with people that they feel like they have nothing in common with. Have you ever tried to have a conversation with somebody that you have nothing in common with? Like, it can be the hardest thing on this earth. Like, especially for me, I'm like right a blend between like introvert and extrovert. I'm like a 50-50 split. So that just makes me weird, if I can be honest. It just makes me weird. Sometimes I'm social, sometimes not. And it's just like, sometimes I feel like it, sometimes I don't. And so sometimes when I'm having conversation, like I was sitting in a conversation with Devin and Caroline and somebody that I didn't know recently, and I'm like asking questions like as much as I can. I'm like, wrenching my brain for questions. You know what I mean? Have you ever been there where it's like the conversation is just tough? It's just a tough one. And you're like trying to make conversation and I'm asking a question and they keep giving me one-word answers. It took me right back to high school and I felt your pain for a moment because sometimes I was the king of one-word answers when I was in high school, but this wasn't a high school conversation. It was like with an older person that you know, I was expecting to be more free-flowing with words, but literally I'd be like, hey, like, so what do you like to do? I don't know. You don't know? What's your major? I don't know. No, I'm kidding. They didn't say I don't know. But it was just a hard conversation, you know what I'm saying? And we have those hard conversations. And sometimes I have to remind myself, even in the middle of conversations, why I'm having that conversation. Because there's something that I feel like I have to offer people. There's something that you have to offer people. And it is hope, it is salvation, it is the gospel, it is the good news. People need to know the good news that you have. But if we're never forced to step out of our comfort zone, if we never force ourselves, we'll never actually be inclusive. And so again, the way to confront your insecurity is to build yourself up in who Jesus says that you are. But I want to share this verse. I think this verse is awesome. Came across this when I was planning this series and I thought, there is no more perfect verse than this verse right here. Psalm 68, verse 6. Psalm 68, verse 6. I want you to look at it. If you brought a Bible, if you brought a phone, go ahead and pull it out. Go ahead and look it up. It's a great verse. And so I think it'll be up on the screen too, maybe. But it says this. It says, God, ready? God, he places the lonely in families. He sets prisoners free and he gives them joy. And then the last part says, but he makes the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. Old Testament, we know that now his redemptive plan through Jesus is he wants everybody to receive the life of joy and goodness and be a part of the family. So it says, God places the lonely in families. He places the lonely in families. I love that because as I was planning this series, I'm like, we are a family. And We've been brought into a family by God. We're now his hands and his feet. The Bible says that we're his workmanship, that we've been created anew to do the good works that he's prepared for us. So if he brings the lonely into families, guess what? We're called to bring the lonely into families. We're called to bring the lost, the dying, the broken, the ostracized, the people who feel like there's no hope for tomorrow. We're called to bring them into a family so they can experience the joy of salvation that we've experienced. Come on, if you can get excited about Jesus for about 30 seconds, why don't you take a real quick praise break when you realize that you've been set free, when you realize that your life has been changed, that you've been adopted into this family, and that you're called to bring people into the family. If you can't get excited about the salvation of your soul, can I ask you to reconsider your social sphere? If you can't get excited about the salvation of your soul, that Jesus, he went to a cross for us. He died. He defeated hell, death, and the grave, and he rose again. You know, we should have been excluded. Adam and Eve, when they sinned in the garden, they excluded us from God. They excluded us from ever having a relationship with God in that moment when they sinned. Why? Because God was holy and he couldn't associate with sin. But Jesus came. Jesus came so that we could be included. All of the wrath of the sin of the world went on Jesus. God put it on Jesus. It pleased him to put it on Jesus so that he could call us included, so that he could say, I want you included. I want you to be in relationship with me. I want you to be free. I want to set you free from your sin, and I want you to be alive unto what you have for me. If your life up to this point has been about anything other than serving Jesus, can I ask you in 2018 to carefully reconsider and recalculate and recalibrate your priorities so that you can see that you've been called by God for such a time as this, that you've been appointed for this time that is now, and you're here because you've been included. And because you've been included in this family, you can now include people. You can bring people into the family. I love that. I love that God, through Jesus, included us when we once were excluded. And that now that we've experienced the joy of salvation, that we can go ahead and do the same thing. I still believe that the local church is the hope of the world. I still believe that Jesus is the only way to experience hope, and he is the only way to heaven. I still believe that the thing that this world needs more than anything is Jesus, that they're trying to fill a void with everything else. They think the relationship will satisfy. They think the pot will satisfy. They think the drugs, other drugs, heroin, whatever, will satisfy. Sit across from people all the time who thought it would satisfy, and it took them further than they ever thought they would go, and they don't know how they ended up here, but here they are. And I've seen God redeem their lives, but I always think, like, what if somebody got a hold of them before them? What if somebody included them in the family before they had to go through all that? Because what we don't see, sometimes we glamorize those things, and what we don't see is what the other side of them has to offer. The addiction, more brokenness, more regret. God can always restore. But I think one of the best testimonies that you can give is I didn't have to go through the regret. God restored me before I made a bunch of mistakes that caused a bunch of regret. And if you're in here tonight and you say, I've made a bunch of mistakes, I'm not living a life that I'm proud of right now, God has restoration in mind for you. I'd ask you to recalculate your life, to reassess your life, reassess your priorities, and see if Jesus is the center, because he is the hope of the world. If you've been feeling hopeless and broken, and you've been feeling like there's really no hope for your tomorrow, I'd encourage you, check your priorities. Is Jesus where he needs to be? He is the hope of the world. And we've been called to bring his hope into our world. What is the answer to the suicides in our region? It's us understanding who we are enough to care about what to do. It's us knowing who we are as his family, to know that he's called us into this family. And so we've been called to include people into this family. I believe this wholeheartedly, and I want you to write these things down. I was thinking today, as I drove in today, I was thinking, there is just so much bad news. Have you ever noticed that? Like how much bad news there is in our world right now? Like if you didn't read your Bible at all and you just heard everything that was happening around you, you would easily be discouraged and then probably easily be depressed if you were just hearing about the news, because there's more bad news than there is good news, it seems. But how many of you know in here tonight that the good news of the gospel, it will always be greater than the bad news of everything else that's going on? The good news of the gospel will always be better than the bad news. It breaks my heart every time I hear that somebody committed suicide and took their life, especially a young person, because I think you had so much life. God had so much in store for you. If he could take somebody untalented and unqualified like me and do something with my life, he could do something with anybody's life. I think if I just would have been able to reach them, if somebody just could have talked to them, if somebody could have just loved on them a little bit, maybe they would have made a different decision. Maybe they would have saw life worth it. And it breaks my heart every time, but I think the thing about it is they're hearing bad news. They're bombarded with bad news every single day. If we fail to infiltrate this world with good news, people could die only knowing that there was bad news. Because there's no other good news, really. There's no other good news that there is hope for tomorrow, that there is joy ahead, that there is something better for your life. There's no other good news like the good news that we have. I believe wholeheartedly that the light will always be greater than the darkness, that the darker it gets. So right now in our region, with everything that we've seen, with everything that's gone on, as dark as it seems, that's when the light can shine. It's time for us to realize that we are a city on a hill, that we're not to be hidden, but we're to be exposed. We're to be seen by people as light. When you walk through the hallways of your school, do you look at yourself like a city on a hill? Do you look at yourself like you are the light of the world? Because if he is the light of the world and we've been brought into the family, then we contain that same light. And we can walk into a world that is dark and bring just a little bit of light. How many of you know it takes just a little bit of light to drown out the darkness? Just a little bit of light. I believe the light will always be greater than the darkness. And I believe wholeheartedly that love will always be greater than hate. There's a lot of hate in this world. That's why at the United, we love first. When we want to flip somebody off on the road when they cut us off, we love first. When we want to cuss somebody out when they treat us bad, we love first. When we want to give somebody a piece of our mind, we love first. When we want to be disrespectful to our parents, we love first. We love first. Why? Because he first loved us. And love is always greater than hate. The only way this world will change is if we learn to love the way that Jesus did. If we learn to be light the way that Jesus was, and we learn that the good news is the greatest thing about our lives, and it deserves to take the highest priority, because we've got to get this message out. I want to encourage you. Here at the United, we are family. We're not only a family together, but we're a family that's been called to be inclusive. We're a family that's been called to reach out. If the family stops here, then we've failed to do our job. We've all been called to this commission. We've all been called to understand the season that we're in. We've all been called to understand the message and the good news that we've been entrusted with. It's not just for us, it's for everyone. That's why here at the United, we say welcome home. Because we believe no matter what side of the tracks you're from, no matter what you believe, no matter what you've been through, no matter what baggage you have, you belong right here. Let's pray.